The private room at the Monarch smelled of truffle oil and old money. My sister Lauren occupied the head of the table like royalty, perfectly centered, bathed in soft amber light that made her skin glow. Tonight was her celebration, what she proudly called her brand launch. In reality, it was a two-page feature in a regional lifestyle magazine, but she spoke about it like it was a seismic cultural moment, the thing that would finally announce her arrival. My mother, Susan, rose from her chair and tapped her fork against her crystal flute. The chatter died instantly. She smiled at Lauren, her voice thick with staged emotion. "To the bravest soul in this family," she said, "the one fearless enough to chase the biggest dreams." Applause rippled around the table. I joined in, clapping automatically, my palms meeting without enthusiasm or resistance. That's when the waiter appeared. He didn't approach my mother. He didn't acknowledge my father. He walked straight toward me and gently set a thick leather folder beside my water glass. I opened it. $3,450. I stared at the number. It wasn't just a check, it was an expectation. My mother leaned close, her breath tinged with expensive Merlot. "Teacher salaries are reliable, sweetheart," she murmured, patting my arm. "Help your sister." "It's the least you can do." I looked at her hand resting on my sleeve, then I looked back at the folder. I said nothing. I closed it, laid my fingertips flat on the leather, and slid it across the table until it struck the stem of her wine glass with a clean, sharp clink. "Before I tell you what I did next, I want to know. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to see who's part of our community tonight." The silence that followed wasn't polite or awkward, it was absolute, the kind that slams into a room like a gunshot. My mother stared at the folder pressed against her glass, her face locked in stunned disbelief. Lauren's mouth fell open, her eyes flicking around the room to gauge the audience. The guests, minor investors, local bloggers, distant friends, shifted uneasily, suddenly fascinated by their napkins. I stood. My legs felt oddly weightless, as if gravity had loosened its grip. I looked at Lauren, then at my mother. "I think the brand should cover the cost of the launch," I said. My voice was calm, even loud enough to reach the far wall. I didn't wait. I turned and walked toward the exit. Behind me came the scrape of a chair and my mother's sharp whisper. "Madison, sit down." I kept going. I passed the host's stand, moved by the coat check, and pushed through the heavy oak doors into the night. The cold air hit my face hard, biting, and for the first time all evening, I inhaled fully. My fiancé, Jacob, followed close behind. He didn't speak. He just opened the car door for me, his jaw clenched. We drove home in silence. Tires hummed against the asphalt. My pulse beat steadily in my ears. Streetlights streaked past the window as I waited for the guilt, for the panic, for the instinctive urge to apologize and repair the damage I'd caused. It never came. Instead, there was a strange, sharp clarity. I looked down at my hands folded in my lap. They weren't shaking. For years, I'd been the buffer, the one who absorbed impact, smoothed tension, paid the emotional and financial toll so everyone else could stay comfortable. Tonight, I'd return the bill. And nothing collapsed. The sky stayed where it was. Jacob reached over and squeezed my hand. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," I said, surprised by how unfamiliar my own voice sounded. "I think I just resigned." "Good," he replied. "It was overdue." We pulled into our driveway and I looked up at the dark windows of our apartment. It felt calm, safe. Inside, my phone was probably already exploding, notifications stacking like kindling. But here, in the stillness of the car, I felt something I hadn't felt in 10 years: control. I unlocked the door and stepped into the quiet darkness of the living room. For years, I'd told myself I was the strong one, the fixer. The dependable daughter holding the family together while everything else unraveled. Standing there, slipping off my coat, I realized that story was a survival lie. I wasn't a martyr, I was a gambler. There's a psychological concept called the gambler's fallacy, the belief that if something hasn't paid off yet, it must eventually. In relationships, it looks like this. If you pour in enough kindness, enough money, enough effort, the machine has to reward you eventually. I treated my family like a rigged slot machine for a decade. Coin after coin, convinced the jackpot of love and validation was inevitable. I thought about the deposits. The $3,000 for my father's therapy when his midlife crisis turned into a sports car he couldn't afford. The security deposit for Lauren's first city apartment because she had no credit. The endless loans for emergencies that were really just consequences. Every payment came with the same promise: this is the last one. This is the one that will make them see me. And sometimes the machine flashed lights, a thank you text, a Christmas hug, my mother saying, I don't know what we'd do without you, Madison, just enough to keep me pulling the lever. But staring at that bill in the steakhouse, I finally understood. The game wasn't broken. It was built to take. It was never going to pay out the jackpot I'd been waiting for. I poured myself a glass of water. My hands were steady. I wasn't waiting to win anymore. I was out of coins. In the bedroom, the silence felt charged. My phone lay face down on the nightstand, vibrating violently against the wood. Not a polite buzz, a furious rattle. The screen lit the room in spasms. I picked it up. Messages stacked relentlessly. Lauren, are you out of your mind? You humiliated me in front of investors. Dad, your mother is crying in the car. This is petty, Madison, even for you. Mom had left a voicemail. I didn't listen. The transcription preview was enough. I don't know who you think you are, but you need to fix this now. I scrolled. Not one message asked why. Not one asked if I could afford it. Not one asked if I was okay. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about the disruption. The ATM had declined their card. It was coordinated, overwhelming. Designed to push me back into apology and compliance. But as I read words like selfish, dramatic, ruinous, I felt no shame, just detachment, like a scientist observing a specimen. This wasn't love. It wasn't even family. It was a transaction that had failed. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my laptop. Blue light filled the room. I didn't respond to anyone. I opened a blank spreadsheet. If they wanted to talk about what I owed, fine, but we'd use math, not guilt. I cracked my knuckles and began. Date, item, cost, the rent for Lauren's studio 6 years ago. Check 45, $1,200. Dad's DUI bail, $5,000. Mom's mental health retreat to Sedona, $800. The numbers piled up quickly, a black and white record of my own stagnation. Then I added a new column. I called it the ghost ledger. This one had no receipts, missing my anniversary dinner because Lauren panicked about a casting call. Cost, one memory. Cleaning out Dad's garage for an entire weekend while he watched football inside. Cost, 2 days of my life. Mom congratulating my promotion, then spending 40 minutes on Lauren's haircut. Cost, self-worth, I typed until my fingers ached. Every swallowed apology, every ignored boundary. Every time I'd been the therapist, the driver, the punching bag, a balance sheet of grief. The total was devastating. I wasn't just overdrawn, I was bankrupt. Jacob looked up from his phone. Hey, he said, look at this. He showed me a photo he'd taken of the receipt. He zoomed past the steaks and wine. At the bottom in small print was a charge I'd missed, private room deposit. Future event hold $1,500. I froze. What is that? I don't know, he said. But it's dated for next month. I grabbed my phone and called the restaurant. It was late, but the manager picked up. I put on my best mother's assistant voice. Hi, I'm calling to confirm the details for the deposit on the Henderson receipt from tonight. We just want to make sure the date is correct for the anniversary party. The manager tapped on a keyboard. Yes, ma'am, the Tuscanini room is reserved for Susan and David's 30th anniversary celebration on the 15th. The $1,500 deposit secures the space. I hung up. My hand was shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. The 30th anniversary party, the one Mom had told me was canceled, the one she said they couldn't afford this year, they weren't canceling it. They were booking it, and they were using my money. The money I was supposed to pay for Lauren's dinner to secure the venue for a party I wasn't even invited to. I looked at Jacob. They didn't ask to come over, they announced it. Sunday afternoon. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. We're downstairs, buzz us up, we need to settle this. I looked at Jacob. He was standing by the kitchen counter, arms crossed, looking ready for a fight. Do you want me to stay? He asked. No, I said, you stay in the bedroom, I need to do this myself. I needed them to see that my strength didn't come from him, it came from me. I buzzed them in. When I opened the door, the hallway seemed to shrink. My father walked in first, filling the space with his heavy, disappointed presence. Mom followed, clutching her purse like a weapon. Lauren brought up the rear, wearing oversized sunglasses indoors, presumably to hide eyes swollen from performative crying. They didn't take off their coats. They didn't say hello. They marched into my living room and claimed the space as if they held the deed. Sit down, my father said, not a question, a command. I sat in the armchair facing the sofa. I placed the manila folder I had prepared on the coffee table between us. Inside were the spreadsheets, the bank statements, and the blown-up photo of the receipt with the Italy deposit circled in red marker. I rested my hand on top of it. We are going to reset, my mother began, her voice tight and controlled. She sat on the edge of the sofa, her posture rigid. You have lost your way, Madison. Tuesday night was a disgrace. You embarrassed your sister, you disrespected your father, and you made a scene that people are still talking about. I've never been so humiliated, Lauren added, her voice cracking perfectly on cue. My investors were asking if we're financially unstable. Do you know how hard it is to get funding when your own sister implies you're a charity case? We are willing to move past this, Dad interrupted, holding up a hand to silence Lauren. He looked at me with that familiar mix of sternness and pity. We know you've been under stress. Maybe you're jealous of Lauren's success. Maybe you're feeling left behind. We forgive you for that, but you need to apologize. You need to pay the bill you walked out on, and you need to make this right. I looked at them, really looked at them. For years, this tribunal would have terrified me. I would have been crying, begging them to understand, desperate to prove I wasn't the bad guy. But today, the fear was gone. In its place was the cold detachment of an auditor staring at a failing company's books. They weren't my family in this moment. They were bad investments trying to secure another round of funding. Are you finished? I asked. My voice was soft, flat. We're finished when you apologize, Mom snapped. I didn't apologize. I didn't scream. I just tapped my finger on the manila folder. I'm not here to apologize, I said. I'm here to review the accounts. The air in the room shifted. They sensed a drop in pressure. The sudden realization that the script they had written for me was not the one I was reading. They thought they were here to discipline a rebellious child. They didn't realize they were sitting across from a creditor who was about to call in the loan. I opened the manila folder. The sound of the paper sliding against the coffee table was the only noise in the room. I picked it up, the blown-up image of the receipt. I didn't look at them. I looked at the numbers. Item 1, I read aloud, my voice devoid of inflection. Dry-aged ribeye medium rare, $85. Item 2, bottle of Vicleco, $400. Item 3, truffle fries, $18. Madison, stop this. My mother hissed, leaning forward, you're being ridiculous. I didn't stop. I dropped my finger to the bottom line, the one circled in red ink, item 4. I continued looking up to meet her eyes. Private room deposit, future event hold, $1,500. I paused, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. I called the restaurant mom. They confirmed the reservation. The Tuscanini room for your 30th anniversary party next month. The one you told me was canceled because you were too broke to celebrate. The color drained from my mother's face. My father shifted uncomfortably suddenly, finding the pattern on the rug fascinating. Lauren stopped fake crying and looked at her parents confused. You said you weren't doing a party, she said. We didn't want to burden you, my mother stammered, her eyes darting between me and Lauren. We knew you were stressed about money, Madison. We didn't want you to feel obligated to buy a gift. Obligated? I let out a short, dry laugh. You didn't want me to feel obligated, so you just used my credit card to book the venue. I picked up the second stack of papers, the spreadsheet. The ghost ledger, I fanned it out on the table. It was 5 pages long, single-spaced. This, I said, pointing to the columns, is an audit of the last 5 years. Lawrence's rent in 2019. Dad's DUI lawyer fees. Mom's mental health trips. The phone bill I've been paying since I was 22. The streaming services you all use but don't pay for. I looked at my father. You called me petty. You said I was ruining the family dynamic. I tapped the total at the bottom of the last page, $42,350. That is what I have paid into this family in the last 5 years. That is a down payment on a house. That is a wedding. That is my future liquidated to subsidize your lifestyles. My father's face went red. We raised you. You owe us. I don't owe you anything. The volume of my voice didn't rise, but the intensity did. It cut through his bluster like a knife. I realized something tonight. I'm not a daughter to you. I never was. I'm a venture capitalist. I'm the silent partner you go to when you need a bailout, but don't want to give up any equity. I stood up, towering over them as they sat on my second-hand furniture. And I have decided that this is a bad investment. I'm pulling my funding. I pointed to the door. Get out, Madison. My mother pleaded, standing up, reaching for my hand. Let's just talk about this. We can work out a payment plan. I pulled my hand away as if she burned me. There is no payment plan. The account is closed. Get out of my house and leave your key on the table. If you try to use it again, I'll change the locks. If you harass me, I'll take this spreadsheet to small claims court. I am done purchasing your love. They looked at me, really looked at me, and realized the bank was closed. There were no more loans to be had. Slowly, silently, my father stood up. He put his key on the coffee table next to the evidence of his greed. He didn't look back. They filed out one by one, the door clicking shut behind them with a finality that echoed in my bones. The leaves outside my apartment window turned from green to gold and then to brown. It has been 3 months since the audit. My phone sits on the coffee table, screen black, silent. For years, that silence would have terrified me. It would have felt like punishment, like the calm before a storm of guilt trips and demands. But now, the silence feels different. It feels like a receipt for a debt fully paid. It feels like peace. I opened my banking app this morning. The numbers were higher than I had ever seen them. The monthly drain, the phone bills, the streaming services, the emergency loans that never came back had stopped. The $42,000 I would have bled out over the next 5 years is staying right here. I turned to Jacob, who was making coffee in the kitchen. "Book it," I said. "We aren't going to Italy. We aren't going where my mother wanted to act out her fantasy of a perfect family. We are going to Tokyo because that is where I want to go. And for the first time in my life, my resources are funding my own desires, not someone else's delusions." I sat down at my desk and opened the laptop one last time. I looked at the spreadsheet, the ghost ledger. It was no longer a source of anger. It was just data, historical records of a failed business venture. I moved the file to the archive folder and clicked close. The screen went black, reflecting my own face back at me. I looked tired, yes, but I also looked free. I realized then that the cost of my freedom was high. I lost a mother, a father, and a sister. I lost the illusion of a safety net. But looking around my quiet, peaceful living room, knowing that no one was coming to disturb my sanctuary, I knew the price of staying would have been higher. The account is closed. The balance is zero, and I am finally in the black. If you've ever felt like an ATM for people who treat you like a stranger, share this story. You are not a bank, and you don't owe anyone your peace. Subscribe for more stories about breaking.